And welcome to it. I'm your host, Jon Justice. I'm glad you are here for another episode of A Star Wars Show. As always, if you'd like to email, you can do that. TalkShowNerd at gmail.com, or if you're enjoying this up on YouTube, you can leave a comment there. Be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel so you never miss an episode. And also, subscribe to the podcast if you happen to be enjoying it there. We're in the middle of the calm before the storm, ahead of Andor Season 2, as I'm just about ready to wrap up my rewatch, once again, of Andor Season 1. We have Star Wars Celebration right around the corner, about 1 month from now, April 18th through the 20th, this time taking place in Tokyo, Japan. So, between anticipating not the Mandalorian and Grogu, which we'll be talking about this week, but Andor Season 2 and any reveals that we may get from Star Wars Celebration, things have been relatively quiet on the Star Wars front. As I mentioned last week, I'm still enjoying the Rebels Rewatch podcast, and going back and rewatching Rebels myself, such a fantastic show. Reminds me that Dave Filoni, if he is to be sort of the successor to Kathleen Kennedy, how I'm absolutely in support of that. Just the storytelling in this animated show that has animation that's a bit of a step down from what we got in the Clone Wars. Although, as I discovered during the Rebels rewatch podcast, A Pod of Rebellion, that was partly not only a cost-saving measure, but the intent of Dave Filoni. He designed much of the Rebels Star Wars universe based off of Ralph McQuarrie's original concept art, which, now that I'm told that, makes a lot more sense. I always knew that there were portions of Rebels that were certainly inspired by Ralph McQuarrie's work, having gone through the art books and the art of Ralph McQuarrie relating to Star Wars for decades now, starting as a little kid and absolutely loving those original art books. They've been drawing inspiration from Ralph McQuarrie's work for a long, long time, and certainly ever since Disney went and took over Star Wars. But to actually hear that this was just beyond a few ships or walkers, right on down through the characters and the stormtroopers themselves, when I go back and look at the Ralph McQuarrie work, it makes a little more sense. I had thought that they had designed the TIE fighters, for example, more based off of the toys, because the toys were never reflective on a one-to-one scale back in the late 70s, early 80s, based off of what we've seen on screen. They were always sort of redesigned and resized for the use of play with the 3 3/4 inch Star Wars figures. And so I thought that the vehicles were designed, and specifically the TIE fighters, based off of that. And it turns out they weren't. They were actually designed based off of Ralph McQuarrie's artwork, which just makes Rebels even more special, in my opinion. There is one news item that I want to talk about this week. It's going to be a relatively short show. You guys are quiet. No emails this week, but that's okay. I won't be offended. Some news broke regarding The Mandalorian and Grogu, the next film we will see on the big screen, and it is rather interesting.
This is not going to go the way you think.
So there was some tax news that came out, some tax incentive in California that was revealed this week, basically showing the various productions in Southern California that had received a tax credit based off of that state's tax credit incentives for Hollywood. And in it, it revealed what the budget is for the Mandalorian and Grogu film. Working off of an article here from Men's Journal, the article is titled "Why the New Star Wars Movie's budget is so shocking." On May 22nd of 2026, nearly 7 years after the last Star Wars movie, The Rise of Skywalker, hits theaters, there will finally be a new cinematic experience from a galaxy far, far away, when The Mandalorian and Grogu, Baby Yoda and Din Djarin, make their big screen debut in the film The Mandalorian and Grogu. The world will see if the small screen Star Wars works as a big screen event. But one detail about this next Star Wars film is turning heads. Compared to every single new Disney Star Wars produced film since 2015, this one is the cheapest. With a budget of a whopping $166.4 million, it's strange to think of The Mandalorian and Grogu as an inexpensive film, and yet here is how it compares against all the other Star Wars films. The Force Awakens, $447 million. Rogue One, $280 million. The Last Jedi, $300 million. Solo, $330 million. And The Rise of Skywalker, $416 million. Now, to put this further into perspective, The Acolyte had a total budget of $230 million. I don't know where that went. The Mandalorian Season 1 had a budget of $100 million. At $166.4 million, The Mandalorian and Grogu is by far the least expensive Star Wars film of the Disney era. And the cheapest Star Wars film since 2005's Revenge of the Sith, which had a budget of $113 million. I do not know if that's adjusted for inflation. In a sense, even though the budget is much bigger than classic Star Wars films, the slightly more modest budget for The Mandalorian and Grogu might bring Lucasfilm back to its scrappier origins, which may be all by design. The original 1977 Star Wars had a budget of $11 million, which adjusted for inflation is about $57 million today. Still much cheaper than any of the current movies, and yet The Mandalorian and Grogu is closer to that kind of money than The Force Awakens, which had a budget that was almost triple 10 years ago. Now, in 2015, The Force Awakens grossed to $2.7 billion at the global box office, more than justifying its massive budget. Because it's been a while since we've had a new Star Wars movie, the Mando is already so beloved, it feels possible the next movie could pull similar numbers at a fraction of the cost. Basically, with a slightly more modest budget, The Mandalorian and Grogu has already set itself up to be the comeback movie the Star Wars franchise needs. In short, the Force is very much with Baby Yoda and his cool, deadly dad. Okay, so let me share my thoughts on this. I don't think it's going to pull in Force Awakens numbers. I don't think you pull in Force Awakens numbers again until you get back to saga stories. I'm going to keep beating that drum here on the show. I feel like that's where the fandom is. That's where the bread and butter is. And translating the fandom of The Mandalorian and Grogu from the small screen to the big screen, you're going to have some carryover, but in terms of the larger storytelling, is there enough to compel the audience to come out and see this movie in droves? Now, the smaller budget may be a part of this. I don't think Disney puts this information out, even though this didn't officially come from Disney itself. They did allow this number to get out there. And I think they did it for a reason. You're keeping expectations in check. If you've got a movie that's $166 million in terms of budget, you got to factor in another $100 million or so when it comes to the promotion of the film itself. You know, you pull in a budget that is 500, 600, 800,000, you know, shy of $1 billion, and Disney is still going to go and look at that as a success. From a monetary standpoint, I think the bigger issue is going to be, is it going to be a success in terms of the fans and bringing Star Wars back to its glory, being a film series that drives people to the box office? I don't know. I don't know if there's enough there with The Mandalorian and Grogu for people to go, well, I can watch it on Disney Plus already. Do I need to go see a movie version of this? It's all going to come down to the storytelling. We've gotten some rumors and speculation of what that storytelling could be. I'm hopeful, as I've said all along, that this will tie into a broader universe, the Mandoverse, especially when it comes to Ahsoka. I think that that's where, again, Star Wars thrives in providing the fandom with things to speculate on in terms of the mythology. And while there's plenty of mythology within the Mandoverse, Season 3 wrapped up pretty succinctly in terms of where The Mandalorian was at, and so we are looking at a fresh story. Are we going to see a new villain? Are we going to see existing villains? Is this going to be a one-off, or will it be tied to the larger expansive story, in which case you need to go and see this film, or you have a desire to go and see this film because of FOMO, a fear of missing out, and specifically, well, we got to watch this because the next thing down the line is going to go and connect to it. Needless to say, I'm more curious than I am excited at this point in time. I think the excitement will kick in for me once we end up actually seeing some of the footage beyond the leaked footage that came out from prior Disney conventions that showed a little bit of what the movie was going to look like. In terms of the budget and film quality, I'm less concerned about that. There are moments within The Mandalorian Seasons 1, 2, and 3, where I think you could easily go and put that on the big screen and it would play just well. You certainly could with Andor, even though Andor had a massive budget. I think Disney has gone out of its way to try to reduce the cost of the films by utilizing the volume technology, and that's only been getting better and better. The stages with the massive LED screens where they don't need to do blue screen and you still get a desired effect of being on location. But ultimately, my takeaway from this is keeping expectations tempered by allowing the audience to know, because unfortunately we care about these things now, how much the film actually cost, whereas back in the day, from the prequels and certainly with the original trilogy, I don't think any of us really gave a rip of how much the films cost to make. Nowadays, we actually pay attention to those types of things. Listen, that wraps the show up for this week. I knew it was going to be a short one. Not a lot going on right now. Love to hear from you, though. TalkShowNerd@gmail.com or leave a comment up on YouTube. And as always, if you haven't taken time out, if you enjoy reading science fiction or listening to science fiction, I hope you'll take a moment and check out my science fiction space opera series, EMBARK. Book 1 in the series is described as follows. Deep inside D-Corp, the planet's largest civilian and military spacecraft factory, an industrial accident has set off a catastrophic chain of events. As D-Corp's ruthless leader attempts to exploit the chaos and seize control, the ragtag crew of the Anniversary discovers a mysterious device of unimaginable power. Now it may fall on a stargazer, a brilliant pilot, a battle-hardened soldier, a tech geek, a ship whisperer, to save Earth's evacuees from annihilation if they can survive the apocalypse first. Don't miss out. It's a fast-paced, action-packed science fiction adventure. No agenda attached to it. Treat yourself, a friend, or a family member with sci-fi. I wrote the series for adults, but it's absolutely age-appropriate for those 11 older. Pick up EMBARK Book 1 today. It's available in Kindle Unlimited, ebook, hardcover, paperback, and audiobook. All 7 books in the series are available that way. You can also purchase paperbacks and hardcovers while they last directly from me if you're interested at a discounted price and incredibly cheap shipping. Only costs $5. Email me, talkshownerd@gmail.com, and I'll tell you how you can purchase those books and get them signed for free directly from me. Again, if you like your science fiction space opera to be epic, filled with romance and action, EMBARK is perfect for you. Available on Amazon.com. Just search for EMBARK, EMBARK, and Jon, Jon Justice. Thank you so much for checking out this week's episode. Short and sweet, but I look forward to hearing from you. Drop me an email. Let me know your thoughts on the budget for The Mandalorian and Grogu. Are you excited for this film? Do you need to wait to see some footage before you are? Or is it The Mandalorian and Grogu that gets you excited enough? TalkShowNerd@gmail.com. Until next week, I hope wherever you are, you're happy, you're healthy, and you're safe. God bless, and I'll talk to you then. Bye.
The Force will be with you, always.
My nerd world.